Welcome to the Super Gamer Podcast. Welcome to the new Super Gamer Podcast. Our guest this week is a veterinarian, an actor, a YouTube sensation, medical director at Arbutus West Animal Clinic. We have Dr. Uri Burstyn. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I should also say, so I actually got called into work today, so if there's weird noises or something in the background, we'll try to ignore it.
I promise you the noises in the background of your work are probably not weirder than the noises in the background of where I work most days.
Right. Well, let's start. So, as I said just before we actually started the podcast here, you know, this is a gaming nerd culture podcast, but you qualify because you are a gamer yourself, and we're going to talk a bit about how cats and animals play and that kind of stuff. So we're fitting it in there. But I am very excited to talk to you. My girlfriend and I are huge fans of your YouTube channel, Helpful Vancouver Vet. I've watched a lot of them. We're relatively new cat owners. Had one for 2 years now. It's my first pet ever, and I'm obsessed with him. I love that thing.
Nice.
So we'll start maybe with, I get concerned that I am boring to him. Like, I throw, you know, a cat toy, and he'll jump for it, or he'll chase it maybe twice, and then he's like, I'm done. And then I don't know what to do. So, like, how do I play with my cat?
All right, that's actually an awesome question. I've actually, my wife has really been encouraging me to make a video on this topic because it's a great point of frustration for her that, you know, she tries to play with the two of my YouTube's co-stars, Claudia and Mr. Pirate, actually live with me. The third one, Sir Lancelot, is in my clinic cat, so he lives at the hospital. But you know, it's a great source of frustration for my wife that she keeps trying to play with Claudia, and Claudia just kind of ignores her, and then I come along, and then I end up getting her to chase the little fish that we throw for her for like 10 minutes, and she's like, what the hell? Why she won't play with me? So it's actually, I was going to make a video on this topic at some point. It just requires a little bit more videography than I'm usually willing to put into my work. But it's actually a good point. So, you know, cats, in order to play cat, you know, we have to think about what is play behavior for cats, right? It's basically training, right? Cats are little ninjas. You know, they're out in the wild. They're surrounded by danger and they're surrounded by opportunity. And play behavior for cats is basically training for hunting, training for stalking prey, training for avoiding things. I mean, that's true pretty much of all animals. You know, there's very few species that will actually play into adulthood. Humans are really kind of unique in that way. I'm trying to think what other species, this is just off my head. I think there's some primate species that can still retain play behaviors to adulthood. Dogs are an example of a species who retain play behavior into adulthood. But remember, dogs are not a normal species, right? They've actually been domesticated, which means we affected their evolution. We selected for these juvenile play behaviors. So one of the features of a domesticated animal is an animal that retains childhood play behaviors into adulthood. And cats aren't super domesticated, so for them it's a little bit less clear. Like, they're not like, they haven't been selected by humans specifically to like play with us. But for them, it's training. It's practice for hunting. So in order to really engage your cat in play, what you have to do is you have to think like a cat, and more importantly, think like the potential prey of a cat. So if you ever have the opportunity to see how mice or rats move across a space, you'll see that they move in they move really fast and then they stop, reassess their environment, and they move really fast and then they stop and reassess their environment again. So they kind of zoom around and then pause. So if you start thinking about how cats prey move, or think about little birds, again, they will kind of flit from branch to branch, and then they'll kind of sit there and like look around, short little jerky movements, then they'll rapidly move across to a different space, stop there, move around, short little jerky movements. So once you start observing that, then you can actually incorporate that in the way you move the toy. And all of a sudden, that toy becomes incredibly fascinating for your cat, because all of a sudden that toy is moving the way that the cat's instincts and the cat's kind of evolved, innate understanding of the world around it tells them the way that prey items move. So I would say that the first step to learning how to play with your cat effectively and how to engage with your cat is actually watch how rodents and birds and little fish move around in the wild. And then you can be just like feed into your inner kung fu student and be like, I will imitate this animal. I will learn its motions.
Well, that makes sense.
And then you can get your cat to actually want to play with you.
One thing I've definitely noticed about my cat is he's far more interested in something or attacking something if I put it behind, like, behind a chair leg or something, or behind something. So he's, in his mind, he's like, I'm going to sneak up on this. Like, then he's way more interested.
Yeah, that's a super valid observation. Certainly, just like peeking around corners, like of course a rat or a mouse that's trying to traverse a big open space, what is the first thing they're going to do? They're going to peek, right? Mm-hmm. So that is immediately very interesting to a cat. And when the cat sees something peeking from around a corner, they're like, oh, this could be tasty. Let's see if I put my paw around there. Let's see what happens. And then you start engaging them, right? Because again, that play behavior it's not really play, it's training, right? And humans are super weird in the fact that we just play for fun. Like,
why does my cat, I don't know if this is an all cats thing, when he's like murdering a toy, when he's got like the rabbit legs going, he's really tearing at it, he'll just like take breaks to lick himself?
That's a good question. Have you ever seen a cat eat anything?
I mean,
other than cat food?
Not really, other than cat food.
Okay. What happens after your cat goes to the dish, has a big feed? What happens next?
Immediately has a bath.
Yeah, big grooming session, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to ask you, why do you think that is?
I guess he feels dirty after getting his paws all gross.
That's pretty close to the truth. I mean, if you think about it, again, hunters, right? What happens when you rip the head off a little prey item? Blood everywhere, right? Viscera. It's a messy business. So grooming is actually an integral part of any predator's lifestyle, because when they get blood on their fur, you can't leave that stuff there, right? It'll rot. It'll attract parasites, flies, maggots. It's gross, right? So you got to clean that blood off your fur, otherwise you can get skin infection. It could actually be bad for you. So when they're playing, they'll pause to do a little like click, click, click. And I think it's a very self-satisfied behavior, like they're very pleased with themselves, but it's also meant there to get some blood off your fur so it doesn't attract parasites and so it doesn't cause skin issues. It all makes sense in that context of that hunting. And I just wanted to do a quick aside to say that while humans, many of the games we play might not necessarily be preparing us for like hunting or later life, there's actually a ton of data showing that people who play video games make better surgeons than people who don't. And I actually looked into this a couple of years ago, and it turns out this data comes from studies done in the 1990s when they were first introducing minimally invasive surgery into the human field, which means, you're doing surgery, you got this like tiny little camera that you put inside your patient, and you look on a screen, and then you're using specially designed instruments to interact with structures inside your patients, and you're looking on the screen, and it's all projected camera. And all those studies showed that like medical students with no surgical training would outperform experienced surgeons in laparoscopic tasks if they played video games, because playing video games created actually the ability to interpret a 3D environment on a 2D screen and gave them the spatial awareness that you just don't have if you don't have a screen. So in a way, playing video games is pretty good training to be a surgeon. That's what I'm trying to say.
And minimally invasive surgery is something you specialize in for animals.
That's right. Yeah, I was one of the first guys in Canada to start doing MIS, and it came kind of naturally to me. And I'm pretty sure that a big part of that is the fact that I've been a gamer since I've been a little kid, and I started playing the original Doom. I played Wolfenstein 3D back in the day, so I started my practice early.
So Mr. Pirate is a shoulder cat. Mr. Pirate, for people listening, absolutely adorable guy. And I mean, they're all adorable, but I think Pirate has a special place in my girlfriend and mine's heart. But especially for my girlfriend, she desperately wants a shoulder cat, and our cat is not. Like, our guy doesn't even really like being held for very long. But there is someone in my city, someone I've actually interviewed, friend of the show, Daniel Voth, who has such a shoulder cat. This guy, Daniel's a really nice guy. He rides a unicycle, and you can see him riding about town, and the cat's just on his shoulder.
Whoa. That's impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
I mean, I guess if any animal's going to ride on a unicycle with his shoulder, it might as well be a cat with their enormously, giantly developed cerebellum and like a fantastic sense of balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there's much advice I can give in that regard. Shoulder catting is a very individual preference among felines. I know that I think Pirate actually learned it from another cat that he lived with when he was a kitten. I was living with my girlfriend at the time in Australia, and she had a little cat named Ondi who just loved riding on her shoulder. And Pirate was when we lived together, and he was Pirate's little kitten. I think he saw that behavior and he imitated it and then he started looking longingly up at my shoulder. So that's one way to create a shoulder cat, is to already have a shoulder cat and just like show them how it's done. Beyond that, I don't know that you can, there's an old saying that you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I feel like the same applies to cats and shoulders.
Right. And I mean, that's fine. If he doesn't want to be there, that's his thing.
Yeah, that's a cool thing about cats, right? Is they got the mind of their own. They're not there to please you. They're
that's for
doing their own thing, and if you want to come along for the ride, you're probably more than welcome. But yeah, they don't really care that much.
So you sign off a lot of your videos with "Don't forget to have fun with your pets," and you've said that in cats, boredom is stress, and stress leads to behavioral issues.
Absolutely.
And I've definitely seen, especially middle of the night, if I get up to get a glass of water or whatever, my cat, that is by far when he's the most bitey. He doesn't have a very strong bite. He's actually missing one of his. When we got him from the Humane Society, they had already extracted a tooth because of an infection, whatever. So he doesn't have a very good bite. But like, I cannot get away from him in the middle of the night. I have to like physically like restrain him to make him stop biting me. So he must be very bored at that time of night.
Yeah, he's probably quite happy to see you out and about. It's probably been a few hours since you've interacted with him. Now, what does he bite you? Like, does he stalk you and like attack your feet, or does he like bite you if you pet him? What
No,
happen?
there's the odd time, you'll get a warning bite if you pet him in the wrong way or he doesn't want to be pet. But generally, no. Definitely in the middle of the night stuff, it's like he's stalking me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, it's really your own fault for being so delicious.
Yeah. Well, I definitely do. My girlfriend gets mad at me sometimes because she'll say I'm encouraging it, because sometimes he's so cute, play with his belly, and he kind of does little like playful bites at that, and she's like, "You're encouraging it. Stop doing that."
Yeah. Well, it's probably not linked to stalking you in the middle of the night. I mean, cats will. So when there's so many, cats have a fairly limited number of tools to interact with you. Biting is one of them, and it can mean so many different things, right? Like when cats just groom, like when they're just, if you see two cats kind of grooming each other and having like a really lovely time, they'll occasionally like nibble on each other and do little bites, and I mean that's just kind of like almost like a massage, right? And when you're a cat and you have really thick skin and you're born with 20 little needles on your paws, you're actually like, pokey things don't bother you that much, right? Like giving cats needles is pretty easy. Like they don't care that much if you get poked by a needle because they're just used to being around sharp things their whole life and a very thick skin. So a lot of what they do, like little love nibbles, it's alarming to humans because we're not used to having our skin poked by sharp things. Like usually for humans, it's a sign that you're impending trauma, right? But for a cat, that's actually might be quite soothing. So you can get certain little grooming bites that have absolutely no malicious intent or behind them at all. Certainly when they get worked up and they play, they're just like humans, right? Like if you wrestle, I don't know if you have any siblings, but if you're wrestling with your brothers, sometimes you guys get a little rough, right? So maybe it bites you a little harder than he means to when he gets worked up, but it's not like malicious, right?
Right.
At the same time, you could also, if you are touching like his tummy and you could just get him worked up and like really playful, right? It also could be that he doesn't want you to touch his tummy, so he gives you a little warning nip. So, and to tell the difference between those is a bit challenging. Definitely takes some cat wisdom. And of course, there's the scary, people are always worried about like being bitten, like in anger, but that's usually very different. If your cat's biting you, but your skin isn't being broken, your cat didn't bite you. Your cat either just groomed you a little bit or just gave you a little warning. If they bite you, skin gets broken, right? Those jaws can generate a tremendous amount of force. And those teeth are sharp. So if they want to bite you, there's broken skin and blood, right? So it's not really a proper bite if there isn't any. So whatever happens, I know what happens when you touch your cat's tummy, but what's happening at night is your cat is just bored and he wants to engage you in play behavior. And I mean, honestly, I see this in my house all the time. Like Claudia will stalk Mr. Pirate. Like Mr. Pirate, he's like a geriatric old man. He's got arthritis. His back's not quite as good as it used to be. So he kind of like just strolls through the house, a little bit stiff. And Claudia's a spry young cat. She'll like stalk him and like pounce on him, and then there's a lot of yowling and She just assaults him all the time. And it's just a normal cat play, right? She's just engaging in play. So your little cat's engaging you in play. Now, you may not want him to engage you in that kind of play because it's annoying or distressing or whatever. So what can you do? Well, you can learn to hover. That's one option. Failing that, you can redirect the play behavior, right? So if you see him stalking you, again, this might be a little hard in the middle of the night when it's dark and you're just half asleep, but you can redirect that behavior. And the best way to do that is one of my favorite cat toy systems, which is thing on a stick. Sure, everybody has a cat probably knows what I'm talking about. It's thing on a stick is like any toy that looks like a fishing rod. You have like a stick and there's a little rope leading off it. Usually there's something at the end of that rope. Have one of those. When you stumble out of bed to go to get a drink or whatever, just pick one up and drag it alongside of you. And you want to redirect the pounce that you know is coming from your cat who's bored and just wants to play with you and is stalking you. Redirect that behavior from yourself, which is undesirable, onto a toy that is desirable. And then you're happy because your ankles aren't getting pounced on, and the cat's happy because he gets a few pounces out of his system, and then you can go back to sleep. And that's actually a really common, like a lot of behavioral issues that we have around animals. Redirecting, they're not necessarily inappropriate behaviors, they're just behaviors expressed in an inappropriate place and time. And then we can use our big forebrains to just redirect it into something more desirable to us.
Right. As far as you mentioned the different bites and learning how to tell between, you can certainly tell with our guy, like he gets a look in his eyes where it's like he's just overstimulated. Like doesn't really know what else to do but just start biting.
Crazy eyes.
Yeah, exactly. So you as a kid, you had a dog with your family. Are you now firmly a cat person? When did the switch happen?
You know what? I firmly don't believe in this idea of cat people and dog people. I think it's just whenever you're just like whatever your last pet was person. You know, obviously I might be a little bit of a skewed individual in that I love animals. I mean, you have to be a little bit crazy about animals to become a veterinarian. But I'm definitely not like I love cats. I love dogs. Cats have a special place in my heart, I think, partially from the clinical perspective of it, just because working with them is so challenging and therefore also rewarding when you do it well. So I think professionally, like I think I get more satisfaction out of working with cats and dogs. But in terms of like pets and like loving, like I like all animals. I mean, the main reason why I don't have a dog, well, there's a couple reasons I have a dog, but they're all linked to where I live, because I live in a city where it rains like 150 days a year. So I don't want to be outside twice a day in the rain for most of my life. You know, if I lived somewhere where it's like super sunny and dry, that might be a bit different. And I also live in a city where real estate's really expensive, so I spend most of my adult life in apartments, and you know, that kind of limits your dog ownership. That, and I work too much. So you know, cats are a little bit more forgiving of like a heavy work lifestyle, right?
Right. That's actually what led us to get a cat as well, is we just couldn't possibly be home enough for a dog. Not that we enjoy being away from the cat, you know?
No. And also, like, that's the advice I always give my clients, which I always am a little self-conscious of this because it feels self-serving, but I always say that cats come in twos. Like, you're gonna be so much happier, and your cat's gonna be happier if you have two of them. And I know that, like, as a veterinarian, it sounds like, yeah, you're just trying to get me to get another cat. But it's legitimately, you know, they keep each other company, they keep each other entertained. And like you mentioned earlier, I'm happy you heard that message, that in cats, boredom equals stress. They need, you know, they need stimulation, they need environment stimulation, and people forget about sometimes. You have a cat in an apartment all day, they get bored, and that's not great for them. And there's things you can do to make the environment more exciting, but there's very few things that'll make the environment more exciting than adding another cat into it.
Well, this leads to a question I very much want to ask. So I tried introducing our cat to a friend's cat. Now, granted, probably a bit of stress just taking him to, you know, a new place, because we went to my friends to do this. My friend's cat, though, was like clearly, you know, right away he's like, oh, let's play. My cat made noises I've never heard before. My cat was like, get away from me. So my fear about introducing a new cat is like, well, I don't want him to like hate this new cat, and then suddenly he doesn't enjoy, like he's stressed in his own home, you know, just by being there. Like, how do I introduce cats to each other? How do I know it's going to work?
Yeah, I mean, so that kind of like environment where you just like bring a cat into a new like cats are very territorial, right? And then neophobic, meaning that they don't like new things. To take a cat out of its territory, you put it into like new territory, new situation, new people, new environment, and there's another cat there. They're gonna go into like high alert, and they're gonna be like, okay, I need my space, I need to sort myself out. And it might take them a few days to do that, right? So if you left your cat there for a couple days, they could have sorted their things out and become best friends. But it's not, the kind of time frame, like about a couple hour visit, isn't really enough in cat terms to get used to a new environment, to explore it, to get used to all the different individuals inhabiting it. Good on your friend's cat who's had another cat invade his territory and he's chill, like that's good. But it's not necessarily predictive of what's going to happen when you introduce a cat into your household. And you could also say that, that growling, it's a little stress, a little environmental stimulation, but that's actually kind of good for your cat, right? It gives them something new to experience. A little bit of stress is good for your life. So it's not necessarily a negative thing. And so if you introduce a cat to your house, it may take a few days, weeks, maybe even months for your cats to really sort out the territory, sort out each other, get used to each other. That doesn't mean it won't happen. And also, like, if you hear some horrendous cat sounds in the interim, doesn't mean it's a bad thing. That's just their way of communicating, right? It sounds terrifying to us, but that's because it's meant to sound terrifying. But it's not necessarily mean that they're not going to be best buddies or that there's any issues there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah. It's obviously personality dependent. You can take two cats together and maybe they just hate each other. It happens, right? But most of the time, if you introduce a new cat to a household, particularly if it's a kitten, they just fit right in. And even introducing two adult cats, there's all sorts of strategies for that, probably a bit more in depth than we can go into in a podcast. But there's a ton of strategies out there for introducing cats gradually to each other, and they kind of take the little edge of stress off. So I'd say like 95 times out of 100, you try to introduce a new cat to a household, it'll work.
All right. Before we move on to more of the video gaming stuff, I did want to mention the video that my girlfriend and I first watched of yours that really got us, we were laughing so hard and really got us into it, is you were talking about cats and whether they can self-regulate eating. Well, our cat is a former stray and a male orange cat. And it is absolutely food obsessed. Like, we cannot have a meal in peace. It's kind of adorable, as annoying as it is. But when you explained, I think probably male orange cats are mostly food obsessed, I was like, yes, absolutely.
Totally. That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, so stress. You're talking about cat stress. Well, human stress. You say one of the main reasons you play games is to unwind, to de-stress. And yet, you play League of Legends, which I feel like is the antithesis of playing games to de-stress.
You're not wrong. As a caveat, I do play League. I go through, every year, I go through, a 6-week League phase, and then I set it aside. So, for me, League of Legends is definitely one of those things I come back to on a casual basis. And I don't play competitive. I usually just play I forget what it's called, just the pickup games, right?
Casual or something, yeah.
Yeah, I don't play ranked, and I like the mechanics, right? I think League has really fun mechanics. It's really every time they tweak it all the time, so every time you come back after a year, it's a little bit different, which is kind of fun. I like figuring things out, right? I like learning about new things. But yeah, I've played, I think, probably 5 games of ranked in my life, and I'm just like, you know what, life's too short to be yelled at by a 14-year-old. But also, I think League is definitely not a mainstay of my gaming life. Let's put it that way.
Is Subnautica? But
on the other hand,
pardon me. Go ahead.
Oh, and I was going to say, but the exception to that is if you can get a couple of friends together and actually play together. Then League becomes really fun, because then you just, then you can just yell at each other all you want, and it's a good time. I used to have some friends who were psychology PhDs, and this happened a couple of years ago, so I'm not going to get into trouble by telling this story, but they had a psych lab at UBC, our local university, which was like they had a bunch of computers in a big room basically. So a couple times a year we'd get together and just have like a LAN party in the psych lab, like on a weekend night, and just play. Basically, the buses would stop running at 2 a.m, so we usually play straight to like 5 or 6 together, and then like all go home. And that to me, that's actually the peak league right there. That's how you play League of Legends, is like 4 friends in the same room. That's the right way to do it.
Yeah, landing is super fun.
Yeah, and then you just lose all the time, but it doesn't even matter.
Is Subnautica officially your favorite game?
Pretty close, yeah. Subnautica is is definitely one of my favorite games of all time, and it's just to me it's like almost everything that a game should be. It's beautiful, it's engaging, it's innovative. It runs good on my computer, and there's actually a bit of a story behind that too, because again, my wife, before we were just dating, she's a bit of a gamer, right? So that's kind of awesome. I'm very lucky that way. And she got it because I introduced her to scuba diving a couple of years ago. So we both really enjoy scuba diving. So she was looking, and she noticed that this was like kind of an underwater themed game. So she installed it at home, and she found that she couldn't play it. She played it for like 4 hours, and she didn't leave the initial life pod. Like she basically leave it and then just immediately run back in and like turn the sound off. So after like a day of this, she came over to my house and she installed it on my computer in my house, and she's like, all right, we're gonna play this together. And then we ended up just basically playing through the whole game, hot seating it for like over like 6 months. It was like one of the funnest things we've ever done.
Cool.
At least around video games, at least.
What Subnautica creature most intrigues you as a vet?
Oh, that's an excellent question. You know, I'm going to say that, forget what they're called in the game, but I think the little manatee creatures that kind of float around in the shallows, and they have like the poisonous gas they let off if you spook them too much. You know, I'm definitely like, mammals are kind of my thing. And I think manatees are some of the cutest things on Earth. So I love the fact that they look like manatees, and I love how the Subnautica team actually modeled their behavior to like fit. You know, in Subnautica, all the animals have their own ecosystem, and I love how they modeled their behavior to really fit their ecosystem and kind of really make sense. And their defense mechanism of like swimming away and squirting poison in the water, again, really makes biological sense. I just love that. So I think they're probably my favorite little beasties. Although I think those crazy like deep cavern octopus, like jellyfish things are absolutely terrifying and like freak me the hell out. So they fascinate me from like a morbid horror curiosity perspective. They're not even that dangerous. I feel like I can deal with them pretty well, but god damn, do they ever freak me out.
You've been the reason I know about Subnautica and how you feel about it is you've had a couple streams, YouTube live streams, in which one you were playing it and one it was sort of a watch along party for the launch of Subnautica Below Zero.
Yeah.
And during that, you said you had a newfound respect for game streamers just because there's so much going on at once. Can you kind of tell us about that?
Oh, for sure, yeah. So, you know, I do some live streams on my YouTube channel, right? Which are mostly just me hanging out, chatting with anybody who wants to join me. And sometimes I get like a couple thousand people hanging out. People ask me questions, usually about vet stuff. I have a cup of tea. I just kind of bullshit. It's super fun. I love doing those. But they're also very low stress, right? They don't. Once you figure out how to set up a live stream on YouTube, which is pretty simple, there's not much more to it other than just hanging out and chatting, right? Whereas like streaming, like there's so much goes into the back end of it. And actually, I have a couple acquaintances who are like Twitch streamers, like professional Twitch streamers. So I've seen like their rigs and what they have to do to make it work. And there's a lot of like people don't realize a lot of back end work that goes into being able to stream. Just in terms of like setting up lighting rigs, your camera controls, like the software you need. You also need to kind of be sharp, right? Because you have to interact with people. Because part of the stream, I think, is a fun part of the stream is people interacting with the viewers. But you're also playing a game, and then you also have to Like it's a big performance. It's almost like theater to me. Like it's almost like improv theater, which I have a lot of respect for. And in my acting life, I've done a bit of improv, and like I just have a huge amount of respect for that kind of live theater aspect of it. And also just it takes a lot of dedication. Like to actually be a successful streamer, you really gotta put in a lot of hours. Like it is no joke a full-time job if you want to have a Twitch stream that actually has consistent viewership, brings in a bit of revenue. You're looking at like 40 hours a week at least. So it's I just have a lot of respect for that, and I think what they do is actually like pretty hard work. It takes a bit of technical know-how, takes a pretty good ability to perform and improvise. So I have a lot of respect for that. And I actually, Sim and I, like we actually talked a bit about streaming games, either through Twitch or through YouTube, because we're hilarious. We think we're hilarious when we play together, like especially stuff like Subnautica. But when we actually looked at it, we're like, man, this is like way more time than either one of us can dedicate to this kind of project. So it's something we still would love to do at some point in our lives, but it is a serious commitment. It's not like just someone goofing off and playing video games in front of their computer.
Do you ever feel guilty when you're gaming and one of your cats wants attention?
Ooh, cat guilt is a very serious topic. Normally, no, because I'm so zoned out I don't even know they're there. I occasionally have to throw Claudia off the desk because she's quite annoying. One time though, okay, the one time I feel guilty about gaming is when Pirate gets up on my desk, or I put him up on my desk. These days he doesn't jump up on my desk. I should put him there and he'll chill. And then he sits down and he always flops over my mouse hand.
Yes.
And I just feel so paralyzed because I'm like, I don't know what the right thing to do there. It's like you just lay on my hand. Like that's like basically a cat blessing, right? But also, I really want to play this game. So yeah, that's the one time I feel cat guilt around gaming. And once in a while you play something like a turn-based RPG, and I feel that's like the happy medium. Like switch a turn-based RPG. Just have a cat on your mouse hand and all is well. You can just still kind of get away with gaming a little bit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the rest of the time I'm in the zone, and the cats can go chirp to their heart's content. I don't care.
Off the top of your head, I guess first thing that comes to mind, best video game cat character.
Oh man. I think cats are surprisingly underrepresented in video games, given how closely like cat culture and gaming culture seems to overlap. I don't know that I can name one off the top of my head. It's a bit shameful. I mean, there's those cat dudes in Skyrim that are kind of neat. They certainly got the attitude down right.
Yeah.
But I never play as them because I feel like the kind of the anthropomorphic aspect of it doesn't really fit. Like the rest of the game is very like medieval fantasy, and then you like having the odd like humanoid anthropomorphic creature interact with kind of feel actually doesn't serve the overall, like it feels like a bit of an outlier to the overall theme of the game. So they're not my favorite, but yeah, I can't really think of any other really good cat characters in games.
I had trouble too, and then looked it up when I thought to ask you this, and there were definitely more than it was like Red 13 from Final Fantasy. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about him. Like there are definitely a lot more than I remembered. I think I went with the cats in Choo Choo Rocket. I don't know if you played that for Dreamcast.
No, I never have. I'm mostly a PC gamer, so a
right.
lot of the console stuff passes me by.
But Choo Choo Rocket is it's just sort of a quick game with friends. Like I don't know how to describe it, but basically like there's a ton of mice running around, and you need to direct them towards your cat, away from the cat. I honestly don't remember, but anyway, it's a really good game.
Well, that sounds like fun.
You are a fan of Vampire the Masquerade.
Oh, totally, yeah.
So are you a tabletop role player?
Oh, geez, now we're getting really into my deep, dark history. I have done some tabletop role playing in my life, but that was mostly when I was in high school. I kind of step away from tabletop role playing just because of the amount of time it takes. Mm-hmm. At some point, I found myself having to decide whether to spend my Sunday skiing or playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm sorry to disappoint the nerds in the audience, but I chose skiing. So,
you could take your character skiing in Dungeons and Dragons.
That's true. I guess you could, yeah. If you have Nordic theme game, um, but I prefer to get the turns in myself.
Right.
But yeah, so I've actually, but I have, especially like during the pandemic, when we're kind of stuck without that much to do. I got back into role playing. Actually, there's a online gaming service called, I think it's Roll20. It's like a website that lets you play tabletop RPGs. They have a little interface. I actually played some Vampire through Roll20. That was actually really, really fun.
Cool. I have to recommend to you, friends of the show now, very recently, but there's a board game tabletop role playing game, Magical Kitties Save the Day. And it's certainly a more kiddie kind of thing, but I played it with friends, so adults can play and have a great time. But it's basically Dungeons and Dragons with a much simpler rule set, and you are cats.
That's hilarious. I have played a lot of Exploding Kittens, the Oatmeal's
yes.
cat-themed card game. I really enjoyed that. But Magical Kitty Save the Day. I'm going to spend some time looking into that, for sure. I think the reason I like Vampire is because it's so dark and dystopic, too. Like, it's kind of the same reason I've dipped my toes a little bit into Warhammer 40K, mostly through video games rather than the tabletop thing. But something about just dystopic futures just really appeals to me, and I think that may be like the kind of the feline side of my personality that just likes a little bit of chaos and darkness.
I think cats would be into Vampire.
Oh, absolutely. If you ever seen the fangs on a black kitty, you know they'd be into Vampire.
As far as video games go, maybe I wanted to bond with my cat and just have him hang out and have him watch, whether if he wants to. Is there like light patterns or sounds that cats would be more interested in or stimulated by?
Yeah, I would say. So when I was in university, this was before I didn't have flat screen TV. Sorry, flat screen computer screen. I was using one of the old CRT monitors, and I think the transition from computer monitors to flat screens is a great tragedy for cats because Mr. Pirate every cat I know actually loves hanging out on top of the giant old blocky computer monitors. I feel like at some point somebody's going to realize this and come out with an accessory where you put a big heating box on the back of your flat screen so a cat could hang out on it. Because honestly, I think the best video game for engaging cats, if you have a big giant screen, is Microsoft Excel. Pirate, when I was like in school doing like spreadsheets for school projects, Pirate used to hang out on top of my monitor and constantly swat down at the mouse moving on the screen. It was the best. But since we got flat screens, that no longer works so well. So again, I'm going to say turn-based RPGs, like for example, like Shadowrun Hong Kong, Disco Elysium, BattleTech. Because then you can actually have a cat on your lap or cat on your mouse hand without it actually disturbing the cat. I think those are the best like cat games. Europa Universalis, another example, like games where you require very little physical motion and a lot of deep thinking.
Yeah, my cat, the odd time, he doesn't seem that interested in the actual screen stuff very much. He does sit on top of my computer, so you're right about that. But the odd time, yeah, he'll follow like a soccer ball around and maybe try and paw at it, or he once followed a bird flying in Warcraft, which I thought was funny.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think the Microsoft Excel color scheme with that mouse just really dialed it in for feline eye tracking.
Okay. As far as I know, you strongly believe in mentoring and teaching as far as vet studies. Where do you think virtual reality fits in all that? Like, especially, with minimally invasive surgeries, like, is VR going to usher in is it going to be a very good teaching tool, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of what veterinarians do in terms of like examining animals, working with them, has a really big tactile component, right? So in that sense, like, I don't think telemedicine, I know telemedicine has really gotten huge in human side of things, and I know there's a bunch of companies trying to offer it for vet stuff too, but I don't think telemedicine can be done in the veterinary field because you need to actually feel your patient. Like, so much of what we do is focused on the physical exam, and that's basically hands-on body. Like, and it's very different in human medicine. So I think telemedicine doesn't really work. Like I do like online consults for people. Like I do second opinion consults, and I think I can do a lot of give people a lot of value through those. But I never do it on a primary case. So people go to a vet, they get examined, they get lab tests done, and then I help people kind of work through the results of those tests and the findings that have been identified by the veterinarian, like their local vet. And I do this for people like all over the world, from like Europe to India, right? But you got to have that person on site with their hands and their eyes and their instruments to gather your data before you can interpret it, right? But where I think VR does have an application potentially is surgical training. Because again, particularly with minimally invasive surgery, which is still not that common in animal world, like there's not a lot of minimally invasive surgeons in the veterinary sphere, but I think that number is growing, and I think it will grow over time because as people, most public are not aware that you can do laparoscopic surgery in animals, right? But as people become more aware and the demand grows, I think there's definitely a huge part in VR for VR to play in training, because realistically, at the end of the day, once you start manipulating things on a screen, that it becomes very little difference between real life and real practice and practice, right? So I think that'd be really great. Definitely, there's no good VR training simulators yet in the animal side. I know there's definitely some work on the human side using VR simulation for surgical training, but I think those aren't accessible to veterinarians yet. But I think that definitely plays a role. But I think in order to offer legitimate mentorship, I think you don't need to get that sophisticated, right? I know that there are programs out there that are not super well utilized, but they're definitely in place. I think the Australian Veterinary Association has one where they try to put new graduates in contact with experienced doctors, and they kind of like a structured mentorship program. I think there's another one that's through the Veterinary Information Network that basically tries to be able to touch and it tries to set up like monthly mentorship check-ins between new grads and experienced vets to kind of get a little bit of guidance that way. And I think that has a great deal of value to both to the people, obviously to the new grads, but also to the experienced doctors, because mentorship is one of the most rewarding things you can do as a professional, right? But I think that can be done with very basic 20th century technology. It doesn't require anything that fancy.
All right. Well, people, whether you are a cat owner or not, if you are one, you definitely have to check it out. But like your YouTube series is it's adorable, it's informative, it's so much fun. People should check out Helpful Vancouver Vet on YouTube. Dr. Uri Burstyn, thank you for being here.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.